Today's episode is for the grown kids who felt too embarrassed or ashamed to say what their parents did for work, the ones that feel guilty for prioritizing their needs above the ones of their parents, and the ones just learning how to carve a path on their own without the help that they wish they had.
So in this episode, we're going to be talking about what it's like to actually grow up being first gen and just experiences about growing up with our parents in the trades, our feelings about their careers, and learning how to celebrate these jobs instead of shame them, because something about being first gen is we carry a lot of shame with us, which is sad. But we'll talk with other first generation students discussing the pride and challenges that come with this background, because it's a lot and a lot of overwhelming emotions and feelings that we don't know how to navigate. And so with that, we'll talk with shame and guilt experts on how to unpack and relieve ourselves from it, because we deserve happiness too.
Yeah.
To guide us along, we'll be talking with a very special guest who has probably made you laugh on TikTok. Leo Gonzalez is a Mexican-American comedian who rose to fame for comedy sketches, but more than anything, Leo is a friend to us and someone that we're always cheering for because he represents people like Kayla and I in whatever room he's in, and that means a lot to us. We also talk with Biyeni, who's a 22-year-old first gen trying to navigate life while coming from an African family. And to help us unpack everything that shame and guilt are, we chatted with Ken Bonneau, who's a psychologist that has written extensively about shame and guilt. Anyways, let's get into the episode.
GrownKid is made possible by the Schultz Family Foundation, dedicated to helping young people unlock their full potential and successfully navigate to fulfilling careers. GrownKid is made in partnership with Joy Coalition, where purpose-driven content means powerful storytelling. From 13 Reasons Why to Unprisoned, Joy Coalition projects are made to bridge generations and drive groundbreaking conversations.
I want to start with the story. I got a story for you.
And I want to listen.
So I remember when I was in 6th grade. No, actually this was like 5th grade. I don't know exactly how this conversation came up. But I was talking with this other girl, and it was this other girl that was just known as like the smart one in the classroom, you know, the very smart one, whatever. And God, I wish I could remember what led up to this, but we were just talking about our parents, and I guess we got into like some sort of little argument, about like, oh, my parents do this, my parents do this, and I remember her being like, yeah, like my parents, like, I don't know what she said. I don't know what they did. They were like, my parents work in this corporate job, whatever it was. I don't know if it was like a writer, lawyer, doctor. My parents do this. And I was like, damn, I can't say anything about that. Like, cause I was like, what does my mom work in? And like, this is so sad, because at the time my mom was working like at a factory, you know, very typical like immigrant story, you know, one of those factories that just make little plastic things and stuff. And I remember just like in that moment, even as a kid, I was just like, damn, like what am I gonna say? Like I can't say like my parents work at a factory. I don't know. Like I wasn't proud of it. It almost was like it was almost like I was ashamed of it, or just like embarrassed, because everybody else was saying like, oh, their parents work such cool and interesting jobs, or very like high class jobs. That I just like stayed quiet, and for some reason that moment stuck with me. Probably like one of the first times where I just experienced like just this like feeling of shame or something. And it's crazy that I still remember that moment so vividly, and at least the feeling of just, and being in my head and thinking like, well, I don't know what to say, and just staying quiet, which sucks, because like this whole episode is just about like that first gen shame and guilt that you feel. And I feel like maybe that's a good place to start is, did you ever feel ashamed of your parents' work and just what they did for a living, or you just felt like you couldn't share that while other people around you shared it so openly?
I mean, I definitely felt a part of what you just said, and that's so sad.
I know, it's so sad.
You're just a little kid, like,
yeah.
you're not aware of class consciousness, or you know, what jobs are looked down upon and which jobs are, you know, socially acceptable, or the ones that you're like quote unquote supposed to go after. And that's just so sad because when you're a little kid, you don't realize until you have just a random conversation like that, and then all of a sudden it's in your face, and then you're noticing it everywhere.
Yeah, like you don't notice that, you don't see anything wrong with it as a kid. You're
They're
just
just your
like,
parents.
yeah, they're your parents and they go to work. It's like no one really tells you
Exactly.
like this is a good work, this is a bad job. And like really there is no such thing as good job, bad job. Like a lot of these jobs that are looked down upon are difficult and needed. You know, like so many people that are like during the pandemic, oh, all your essential workers suddenly became the most important people in the world. And it's like the grocery store workers that people look down upon. Yeah, they're the ones keeping everything together.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I'm trying to think of what I thought. Well, to preface, my dad was the only one that worked, and then my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She like took care of the kid, like, you know, me and my siblings, and ran the house basically because she was doing it by herself. And my dad, he worked two jobs, so literally he'd be gone in the morning and he'd come at night, and like I wouldn't really see him that often. Um, but I have vivid memories of I would be outside in the apartment, and, you know, I'd be playing, doing my thing, you know, playing kickball.
Right.
And then my dad would come home, and like he would always bring a treat with him. He would always bring some sort of food or ice cream. And every time I saw him, I was like, oh my God, my dad is home. Like, you know, like, let's see what he brought, you know? And I just remember like just having that feeling of excitement, of course, for the food, but also my dad, you know, because he's my dad.
Right.
And when you're a kid, of course, you know, you don't really see anything bad in your parents, I guess you can say. But anyways, I knew that he worked something with food because he would always bring he would always bring it home. And then, you know, you just realize like, oh, he's a cook at a restaurant. You know, like that's connect the dots, babe. And my parents, they wouldn't really, or my dad, he wouldn't really talk about his work in a way that was, well, he wouldn't really talk about his feelings, really,
Right.
but, you know. But I think looking back at it now, working two jobs and being on your feet all day and just like being like stressed out, I'm like, wow, that's
crazy. I mean, that takes just
it's a lot. And I think going back to like sharing it with your friends, I don't remember like a specific conversation like you do of sharing what your parents did, but I think it was definitely most amplified in college, of course, when you're exposed to a lot of other people and you get to know what their parents do and you realize these professions even exist. You didn't know. It was so common for people to not, you know, just be like chefs and whatever. But I also felt it in middle school too, of course, and in high school, you know, like having, because the way that I viewed it, even if you're middle class or lower middle class, you're up.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
you're
like
up, you are
growing
up.
up is just like, wow, if you have a house, you're insane. Like you're
Yeah.
crazy. Like you did
You are
it.
filthy rich.
You were rich, literally.
Yeah.
If your pantry was filled with snacks, oh girl,
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
had a completely different view.
Snacks were a luxury.
Such a luxury.
Mhm,
Such a luxury.
mhm.
And so of course I didn't want to necessarily share like, oh, my dad's like he's just a cook. Like,
So
you know,
what were the two jobs that your dad worked?
he was just a cook in both restaurants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's a lot of work, and I didn't realize it at the time. I think now, obviously being an adult and working, it's a lot of mental and physical energy
Yeah.
to sustain that for a week and
For
now
years.
for years on
And that's not like,
end.
he's not just a cook. I mean, he's a cook.
Yeah, like he's well into it. To
Yeah,
say the
like that is very
least.
cool.
But yeah, I mean, even now in college, I definitely still feel that. It's a lot more amplified. And like to this day, I don't know how to unpack that shame that comes with saying like, oh, my dad's a cook.
See, yeah,
You
it's like
know?
it comes out in the little words, like, oh, just a cook. Like in the ways that we minimize
Yeah.
it. I don't know why we do that. Maybe it's to like make ourselves feel safer, just more comfortable. Yeah, I don't know, because it's like when, especially when you're in college and you're older, it's like, oh, what do your parents do for a living? It's like, oh, just like, you know, he
Yeah,
just does
you just
this.
try to you try to minimize
So just
what they
move
do,
past it.
move past it, because you don't want that attention to be on you, or you don't want the other person to feel like, oh, like, damn, sorry about that. Like,
Yeah.
don't be sorry, girl.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
I'm doing just fine.
Yeah,
But
that's so
yeah.
interesting. No, I know because my mom, she did that factory job for a couple of years. And then I think when I was in middle school, she started to pick up a trade. In her case, being like a makeup artist. And so I don't know exactly if there's a word for that, but she went to cosmetology school. I don't know, is that the right word? Anyways,
Yeah, it is.
she went to school, got her degree, certificate. I don't really know what it's called, and she started a new career. She was like, I don't want to be in a factory. I want to do something more. Like, what can I pick up? I've always liked makeup, like makeup, beauty, skincare. Let's maybe do that. And so she went to school for it, and then she got her certificate, and then she started doing a lot of freelance work. And after doing freelance for a bit, she also moved into like another job that was not a factory, but it was like half sales, half like makeup, and like having that experience of being a makeup artist helped because, you know, it's like when you walk into Sephora and everyone's like trying to sell you the things, but also help you do your makeup. And so she was like a salesperson and a makeup artist on the side. And I think it was so interesting that like after that, a lot of that like shame went away because I was like, oh, that's so cool now. Like this is so much more interesting. But it sucks that I even have to feel that in the first place. Like I feel like there should be no shame in any job because ultimately it is, you know, you're providing for the people that you need to provide for, and you're doing it in a very respectful way, in a way that is difficult and hard. It's so interesting to hear about the experiences of other first gen people. Because for us, when did we have that realization that there was shame? Did that? Okay, well, for you, I know that started in school, right?
I know that it started in like middle school and high school. Just like going to like my friends' houses, I would just think, wow, this is luxe. This is luxury.
Yeah.
And I felt shame and, you know, oh, I live in an apartment and like my parents aren't able to do what your parents do. So it's like we're already on just different levels of like wealth or like, you know, all of that. But the transition from high school, because even in high school, we went to high school together.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people around us were low income as well, lots of Hispanics. And so there was, how do you say it? Familiar.
What?
Familiar.
Familiarity?
So there was comfort. There was
Right.
comfort in, you know, knowing that there were other Hispanics around, like low income. You know, we understood each other's backgrounds. But it was most jarring, I guess you could say, when I went to USC and like I just didn't know a lot of things. I just felt really lost and confused going into my freshman year because I mean, even just having my parents come and like help me move into my dorm, not even my parents, having like my siblings and my mom come help me move into my dorm, and then meeting my roommates' parents and such, it was so like
Worlds collide.
worlds colliding for sure. Like there's no like, it's only in the circumstances that our parents would meet.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like they would never otherwise cross paths. But yeah, freshman year, I just remember feeling very, very out of place, very uncomfortable, and lots of shame, of course, that comes with that. Because when you're exposed to other kids that went to boarding school, which I didn't even know was a real thing. I
Don't
did
even
not
know what that means.
I
don't even know
To
what
this
that
day, I
means.
still don't fully know what it means. I think you're just in school in a different country, but I
I have no clue.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a real thing. I didn't know like private schools were actually like that was a real option
The people
for
are
people.
paying for them.
People are paying for it, and people are willingly and gladly paying for it in a way that it's not hurting them.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think just being exposed to so many different worldviews and international students too. I have never been like in such a place where there's so many different types of people in the world, especially coming from, again, communities where it's like everybody looks like me, everybody has similar backgrounds as me. And so the transition was just very difficult, especially in my classes where I was excited to learn, I was excited to make friends. But then when you have these experiences that sort of skew the way that you view just education and college and academia as a whole, it really sucks because it's like, this is the place, like you worked so hard to get to this place of college where, you know, everybody has put this pressure on you and you finally reach that point, but it only gets harder from there.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like when do I get a break, you know? And so I think just having those experiences freshman year where I just felt like I couldn't relate to people in the experiences that we shared or the lack of experiences that we shared, you know, like people are coming from, you know, just rich places, wealthy places.
Very different.
It's
Very different upbringing and experiences.
Exactly. And so, of course, I felt the shame of, oh, I don't want to share where I came from. I don't care from Anaheim. Or when I would share that I'm from Anaheim, they'd be like, oh, Disneyland. Like, oh, that's such a nice area. I'm like, yeah, it's a really nice
Not quite.
Yeah. Like, go outside of the 2-mile radius and we'll see. So, yeah. And just the feeling, too, of just knowing that, like if they were to ever see, like, where I live or how I live, they just would not understand it at all, you know? It's like, you can't fully be yourself in that environment. You know, you have to, like, put on this persona of, oh, I'm just like you guys. Like, oh, I'm not from Anaheim now. I'm from, like, Orange County.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I'll say OC. Let them, you know, think whatever. Just so I don't have to spare the, oh, it's, like, not like that, but, like, whatever, you know? And so it's just this feeling of, like, needing to put on a different, not necessarily a different persona, but just leave some details out about yourself so that you're more accepted, I guess you can say, you know? And it was obviously difficult and it was hard to, like, make new friends when you feel like all of the people around you are just not on the same wavelength as you. And something that came with that too is realizing that, you know, like, race and class, they're not necessarily equivalent to each other. Because I used to always think, like, oh, if you're Hispanic, you're also low income.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, you're poor too. Like, yes, we have equal footing. No. And that's what really surprised me. And I know that sounds so, like, so yes, of course. But I just had such a limited worldview of, well, social class, everything, that recognizing that really just changed, again, my perspective on a lot of things, you know, like recognizing that just because somebody can be Hispanic does not mean that they're going to understand you. Doesn't mean you guys are going to get along. Doesn't mean they're going to be your friend.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing for me, because even when they are, like, same race, it's different when their parents went to college. It's different when they have a house. It's just, again, it goes back to the whole, like, different experiences thing. And something that I felt too, which makes me so sad, but obviously when you're in an environment where you're being challenged to grow and you're growing and you're recognizing a lot of different things, and again, just growing as a person, going home then feels so weird.
Feeling like we are growing and moving so much, but our parents aren't growing and everything's staying the same for them.
It's
that, I think, is what gets me. Because it's like you still have so much life to live, yet
yes,
nothing is changing. And
I know.
if it makes me feel guilty that nothing is changing for them the way it is for us, and that's, I think, where a lot of that guilt comes from. Yeah.
It's like a lot of the times I would just wish, oh, I wish my siblings could experience this. I wish that they had the resources to live in a dorm, live, like, outside of the house, and, like, have the typical college experience, you know? But of course that wasn't possible. And at some point, I think I just had to realize that they have control of their lives too. You know, it's like, I cannot force myself and beat myself up over something that is out of my control. You know, it's like, I need to learn how to be happy.
See, that's important. I also think that, like, going back to that point of interacting with others from different social and wealth classes, is it'd be nice if someone taught us those kind of life skills of dealing with meeting new sorts of people from different backgrounds and how you approach those relationships. Because it is such a shocking experience, especially for so many first-gen individuals, that, like, you go from never meeting anyone that has ever even lived in a house to being in environments where people are millionaires, people are well off, have incredibly rich and powerful parents. And it's weird for both people because no one really knows how to interact with one another.
Yeah, and that reminds me too, it's kind of semi-recently, I was starting to become friends with this one person, and they're really wealthy, obviously, like whatever. And I am not wealthy, as you can tell. And it's so weird because we got along pretty well. And, like I like their personality, but then they would say and do things that just reminded me of how different our backgrounds were. And it causes this internal conflict within myself of how do I navigate being your friend while also recognizing that like you don't fully understand me.
There's just that first gen guilt and shame of even bringing people home to what is home to you. Like it almost feels like only people from your hometown are the ones that you can bring home. Anyone else that you met in like a big city like LA or New York, like, oh no, like we're not bringing you there because you're gonna see me differently, or I'm scared you're gonna see me as like, oh, like this is how you live. And that is the shame. That is so weird.
Something that I also realized too, in being first gen, especially in college specifically, there's two types of first gen students, I feel, or from what I've noticed. There's the one that like once they're in college, they're like, they're taking full of like, they're taking advantage of all the opportunities. They're going to every mixer. They're they're going above and beyond. Like admire them so much. And then there's a type that will neglect those resources, and they won't go out of their way to, go to the first gen center or like take advantage of whatever resources. And I find that so interesting because I fell on that side of like, well, I have my reasons and I'll share my reasons. Going into freshman year and seeing, I'm a business major too, and seeing everybody in their suits and ties. Me, I didn't know business casual was a thing. Who dresses up for class?
Yeah.
Please let me know. Anyways, I digress. But yeah, just seeing other people like dress up and like go up and talk to the professor and like really, build their network. I was like, okay, so this is the norm. This is it. But when you feel, I guess you can say, betrayed by those professors because they do or say things that aren't appropriate to be said in a classroom setting where there's multiple backgrounds of students and, whatever. I feel that after having those experiences, I felt a lot of resentment, I guess you can say, and disdain towards fitting into that stereotype of, oh, like, I want to go after, like, this internship, or I want to have coffee chats with, like, these people. I'm going to set up my LinkedIn. I'm going to, have 500 plus connections, whatever. I saw all of that as, like, conforming to, like, the USC business stereotype. And so because of that, I just, like, I did not want to do any of that. And that sounds so bad because it's like, girl, those resources are there for you. They're meant to help you. But I just viewed it as, if I do this, I'm like becoming one of them, if that makes sense. And so those were my reasons behind like not taking advantage of those resources.
Yeah.
But I definitely noticed that.
I feel like so many first gen students feel that in so many different ways, both in school and in corporate. These environments can feel so discouraging and so just filled with expectations that either aren't realistic for us or that we feel like we're not good enough for. And I hate the idea of having this shame and this guilt and the pressure to conform even when we feel like we don't want to because it doesn't feel authentic to us. I think I very early realized how much I hated that, but I kind of went the other way of I was like, no, like I'm gonna make space for myself in these environments. I don't want to be pushed away. Like I'm not gonna let you stop me from doing the whole thing because I don't feel like I belong. Like I'm just gonna make myself belong here because like, no, it's not fair that they get the resources and we don't, or that they use it and they take advantage of we don't. Like I want all of that. And so I always went out of my way to remind myself that like, yes, even if I am scared or I feel like I don't belong, I'm gonna do it out of resentment. I'm not gonna shy away from it. But it's so fair. I mean, so many first gen students and us feel that guilt of not belonging because our parents never had those jobs. They never told us what we were supposed to do, while all these other kids, like their parents are lawyers, their parents are doctors, they work in corporate, and they can tell them, set up your LinkedIn, go network, here's how you approach someone professionally, here's how you write an email. We don't get taught those life skills. No one teaches us that. And I think that just sets us behind, and no one encourages us. I think a lot of us can't rely on our parents to give us that encouragement of put yourself out there, dress up, shake have a firm handshake and go out there with a smile. It's like we don't get told that. And so, yeah, it makes sense why we would shy away.
I know. It's so sad. It's like we feel that we just have to make ourselves little, I guess you can say. But I mean, I think us too, like we had the privilege of our parents not having an active say in what we're doing for our careers and like what we should pursue or whatever. Like we had pretty much free reign, which I like, and I don't want to say that I don't like that. I do like that, but I think growing up, again, just wanting that guidance. I just wanted a mentor. Somebody tell me what to do and I will do it. I just needed some structure, but I think we just built our own structure. And going back to college real quick, it's that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Because I felt it all the time, like the first year. And it takes a lot to have to remind myself that I worked hard to be, and that's what I've noticed too. I feel like a lot of times I try to diminish like my accomplishments, but I'm like, I worked so hard for me to be here. And then I'll like just say, oh, okay. I also don't want to be the type that's overly, how do you say? What's another word for cocky? Like
arrogant?
Yeah, I don't want to be overly arrogant about like, oh, like I go to USC and like, like I'm in business, blah, blah. And so I'll just be like, oh, like I'm just like a business major, But then I think I'm literally in USC. Like I got accepted into that school with such a small acceptance rate. Like I was in like one of the top business classes. And yet I'm trying to make that sound like, oh, I was just in a class,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know,
you should not do that. Like that's
not.
No, I do notice that. It's like anytime someone asks you and some of our other friends that are also first gen, it's like the way you guys describe yourselves is just to make yourself like build yourself down, like tone yourself down, like, oh, don't worry about me. I'm just doing my thing. Like don't pay attention to me. I'm not worth the attention, which it's like,
no, I know. I need to do a better job of that. I think just in my head, I'm like, oh, I don't want to be, I don't want to be like the typical, like, I don't want to be them.
You don't want to be them. It sucks because that's how the world works. It's like, oh, I get frustrated seeing my friends do that because you have to learn how to play the game, especially being a first-gen student, trying to be an entrepreneur, trying to make it in the corporate world. Like, you have to know that you have to fit in and that in some ways you have to conform. I hate seeing my friends not want to conform, which in a lot of ways can be a good thing, but not when it's like the opposite of they make themselves small. Like there is a balance between playing the game and doing the whole ordeal and conforming to be able to achieve your goals while still remaining authentic to yourself. And that's a lot of what I feel like I want to cover in this episode with the people that we talk to is like, how do you find the courage to be a first-gen student and not conform in the corporate world and stay authentic to yourself, but also understand that there are ways to handle yourself, because if you don't act a certain way, you won't be quote unquote accepted. And I think because we didn't grow up around prideful people for the most part, I would say, I think we just confuse confidence for arrogance because we're so used to like this overly humble, like, oh, I'm just a factory worker. I'm just this. I'm just this. Like, no, I am a restaurant worker. I am an essential worker. I am a food worker. I'm a this and this. Like, those are respectable careers. I'm a trade worker. I'm in construction. I do this. I'm proud of my work. I think if we were around more prideful people, more confident people, we would understand that there's nothing wrong with also feeling that way about ourselves. And a lot of these other kids that did grow up around parents that had careers that made it easier and more socially acceptable to be prideful, they're the ones that grew up around parents that were just very open and confident. And I think that rubs off on them. And they don't see any reason to diminish themselves because no one in their lives ever did. But we just kind of got stuck with feeling like we need to.
It's just weird because I feel like whether it be subconsciously or like on purpose, we see the shame that our parents feel and experience. And so it transfers into our lives, but we're living such different lives.
I've realized I take a lot of myself and my personality from my mom. And she's always been this very confident, prideful woman, which I really respect. Like, no matter what job she was doing, she was like, oh, I'm the best factory worker there is. I get things done quick. I'm like moving quick. Like, I'm moving more units than anyone else. Or even after she transitions into her new career, she's like, oh, I'm the best saleswoman, or I'm the most charismatic, or I'm so skilled that I'm able to do it so quickly when I'm like doing someone's makeup. Regardless of what job she was doing, whether it was something that's deemed like, oh, that's just like a low income, like little factory job, whatever, she did it with pride, and she did it with a lot of respect for herself and her craft. And that rubbed off on me because I saw her confidence in herself and in her work. And I think subconsciously I started building that mindset that I should be that same way when I talk about myself. Is that I shouldn't put myself down or try to be humble or this like, oh, no, don't worry about me. Don't worry about me. I'm just doing my thing. Like, I just do this. It's always like, no, I'm the best at what I do. I'm good at what I do. I'm confident in it. And I know I can be good and I'm capable. Like, there's no question about that. And my mom had a lot of self-belief in herself. And I think that really rubbed off on me. And now that I realize, like, for a lot of first-gen students, it might have been the opposite because their parents never built themselves up. They put themselves down because society put their jobs down. And, you know, you can't blame them for conforming to that pressure of like, oh, I shouldn't be too prideful. But no, like, you should. Because it not only does it rub off on your kids, but on yourself and your own attitude. Like, these are hard jobs. And if you can be prideful of it, the better.
I mean, I definitely think I was on the other end of the spectrum that you just described, where my parents were not. They didn't really just talk about work in a positive way. It was always like, I'm tired. I got to get to work. You know, it was just something that had to be done. You know, you want to pay the bills, then you have to go to work. And so I think that just transferred over to me. But it's so weird because, like, I'm literally in New York. We're working on our own company. Things are so amazing, and yet I still carry like a sense of shame.
Of what?
I think not necessarily like myself, but like, again, when it comes to like meeting like new people, it's still that lingering of like, oh, home, you know? Like, I can't fully be myself because of that shame.
Like, you don't belong there. You don't belong. You shouldn't be talking to these people. Like, you're not worth their time. Or
no, not like worth their time or shouldn't be talking to, but more so like we're not compatible because of like my background, I guess you can say, you know?
See, I think that is a mindset a lot of people have. But I mean, the data shows that like the best way to achieve financial mobility is by being friends with people from different income classes.
Oh, of course. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. You know, you can't just stay in your community the entire time because you can't go up from there.
So you just need to have that confidence that like, no, you could be friends with really rich people and maybe they don't relate on every part, but if they're a good person, they're a good person. It doesn't matter where you come from. There's like, you can be on equal footing on so many aspects. No one is inherently like smarter or more capable. Yeah. But again, like just being a first generation student, you know, worker, whatever, is just, I think we're so used to feeling like, oh, they're the really smart ones. Mm-hmm. But it's like, no.
I agree with that. I think it's just hard because I haven't had a lot of positive experiences with like a wealthy person.
Right. Okay. Yeah, fair.
Like, yeah, I don't think it's been quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And so obviously when you're exposed to that time and time again, you have this skewed perception of like, oh, if you're wealthy, then you have already these like preconceived notions of the world and society. and me, It's hard because, again, it's just when it's repeatedly in your face and you're surrounded by it, it's not encouraging, to say the least. But let me be more positive. Now that I'm a junior and 2 years have passed, I feel a lot better in myself, and just like being in a place like USC, I feel a lot more pride in that. And again, just feeling like more comfortable. Like I know where and who I can go to if I need support. I found other first-gen students that also have similar backgrounds as me, and it's just nice knowing that I wasn't the only one going through that.
Yeah.
Because I think being first-gen too, and let me preface this by saying I was very lucky in the fact that I was able to go to USC with my best friend, and so also first-gen, similar backgrounds. We've known each other since like 4th grade. And so I had that privilege and luxury of having him, but sometimes you just need to know that it's beyond Anaheim. Like there's other first-gen students from like other places of the world that are going through the same thing as me. And so I think that really helped me a lot. Just talking with other students that were going through the same thing as me, same experiences, it just made everything feel so much lighter.
Yeah. And I mean, that's part of why I want to talk to a couple people that are first gen and have like done this and been so successful, because I think these are feelings that whether you are at a prestigious school or you've made it and now you're like in the media and the entertainment or in a high paying career, these problems follow us. I also feel like, for me at least, I always knew that I wanted to prioritize my own needs, because that's the reason my mom was sacrificing so much. And I felt like I didn't want these sacrifices to go to waste. Some people in my life, very fair to them, I would see them prioritize their parents over anything. Like if they got a job, they would give them all their money and that they would have nothing left over, which I think is so respectable and so sweet. But that just never made sense to me, because I thought, if my mom is working so hard and sacrificing so much, I need to make the sacrifice go and take me as far as possible so I can come back and lift the weight off of her. Like my mom put so much of the weight on her shoulders to take it off of my shoulders. So I felt like I need to run as fast as I can and get as far as possible, because or else, like, what is all this sacrifice for? And I think that's always how I saw prioritizing my own needs as well, which is like a whole nother aspect of being first gen, is how do you prioritize your needs? Like you are constantly told like you should help your family first, but it's like, if I give everything to you and I take nothing to myself, then we risk just ending up at the same place of now we're all struggling and none of our sacrifices got us anywhere near being out of this rabbit hole.
It's a tricky thing to balance, I would say, because I definitely struggle with that, of feeling that I need to take care of my family and be there for them, while also prioritizing like what I want to do and what I need to do. And even now, I still struggle with not feeling guilty when I do prioritize what I want and what I need. I mean, especially even being here in New York, like I have this freedom and this luxury of being here in the city and working on my own thing. And, we're paying for everything ourselves, and we're not taking away from our family, but it's just that feeling of, I wish I could be there to help in any way that I can, like whether it be like getting groceries or like just helping in everyday tasks.
Even financially. It's like, should I be using this money to help pay for next month's rent? Or should I be selfish with it and pay for my rent to go move to another city for a bit and experience
it's a lot of moving parts that I'm still learning how to navigate. And I'm really trying to prioritize my well-being, in the sense of I don't want to feel guilty being here, because that's not going to get me anywhere productive. It's not going to help me in any way, shape, or form. And yes, I need to be mindful of the sacrifices that are being made and be aware of that. But at the same time, I don't want that to debilitate myself in the way that, oh, now I feel like I can't enjoy being here. Now I feel like I have to punish myself being here. But there's no point in doing that.
Yeah, like
Like,
I
I
said.
deserve happiness
Yeah,
too.
exactly. I think we just have to make their sacrifices worth it, or else what's the point? And I think that gives me a lot of hope. Well, on another note, like even just carving your own path, I think being first gen comes with so much pressure, especially if you want to do something that isn't as stable. It's like, how do you pursue your passion or financial stability? Like, how can you do both? Or do you have to choose one or the other? I think a lot of first gen people feel guilty for choosing what they love if what they love isn't something that makes money, which sucks because it's like you are your parents' retirement plan. And it just feels like you can't afford to fuck around, or you can't afford to chase your passion. You can't afford to chase your dreams. All you can afford is to get a high-paying career and a stable job, and anything else is just not an option. And I just don't think that's fair. It's like, yes, I understand that some people might call it selfish to pursue your dream being first gen and knowing that your parents are struggling, but ultimately it's your life. And I think your parents gave birth to you, and that comes with certain expectations of the kind of life and what they should provide for you. It's like, you didn't ask to be born. At the very least, now that you're here, you should be allowed to live a life that you're proud to call your own. And, you know, some parents definitely put the pressure on their kids to go down this path, but I feel very thankful that my parent and my mom just encouraged me to do what makes me happy. And I appreciate the parents that feel that way of like, ultimately, this is your choice.
But I think being first gen specifically too, it's like if you're going into those careers solely for your parents, you're just continuing another cycle of not being happy and not choosing
And then
happiness.
that gets passed on to your
And that
potential
gets-
kids.
Exactly. So it's, again, it's just like the cycle looks differently now, but it's the same.
Some people might call it selfish. I think there's time to be selfish. And when it comes to something as big as choosing a career, it's like, as much as it
That's your
might
life.
hurt in the short term, you have to think about your own long-term happiness. And you should not choose your career for the sake of your parents. And there's so much guilt and it makes it so hard. So I definitely don't blame anyone for choosing a career just to please their parents or just because it's financially safe, even if it doesn't bring them happiness. And I think that's incredibly respectful and just admirable. But I'm just a big believer that you have to do it. You know, you have to just hold on to these feelings of like, God, just, I will make it work, or I'm sorry, but I have to live a life of my own.
And I do want to say it's like, it's not just one or the other of you have to have financial security or
There's room for both.
there's room for both is what I'm saying. You know, like you can choose a career that is financially stable and you can still be happy and pursue things on the side.
Yeah.
Interested in a career in mental health? Check out the Youth Mental Health Corps, a new program created by the Schultz Family Foundation, Pinterest, and AmeriCorps, where anyone with a high school degree can gain experience, skills, and a credential during a year of paid service in the mental health field. You can learn more at youthmentalhealthcorps.org or by checking out the link in the description. Well, up next, we have a conversation with our friend Leo Gonzalez, who has a background that's common to so many Mexican-American families. We had such a good time talking to him and could barely condense the interview to fit in this episode, so stay tuned for the full episode. But anyways, here's Leo.
Where's your family from?
Italy, imagine.
I'm half Italian.
I'm actually not Latino. That's a big misconception.
I'm Greek with Italian roots.
I don't associate with that
yeah.
community.
Winona is definitely like.
No, Guanajuato and Michoacan. But I really just say Guanajuato because that's the only place I've really been. My dad lives in Guanajuato, so he's over there. He had kind of been around once in a while because he does this thing where he like comes, which I think a lot of people do, where he comes to the Central Valley, will work and then go back. He has his wife and kids over there. So I think at that time, 15, my mom and I had just got our first apartment in a long time.
You were an apartment kid.
No, that was our first apartment in years. We didn't have a home for many years, my whole childhood. So it was very spotty. And so we had been like, I think around 12, 11, 12, we had a place, we got evicted from there. And then 13, 14, 15, like 3 years we were back just kind of like going around. So 15 was when we got a place again. And yeah, my mom was working, and right after that, because I graduated, I started school when I was 4, so I graduated when I was 17, and right when I graduated, like within 2-3 months, I left right away. I moved to Eureka, and I spent like 2.5 years in Eureka before I came back to Hanford.
And then what was that like when you went back?
Oh, it was so embarrassing, because it was like you like are free, I guess, and you're like feeling cool for a while, and you're like, oh man, I'm in Eureka, I have like a job that feels big, and like I have keys to this building, like they try, that's constantly like, I think it's like give me the keys, man, like I got the alarm code, like at this church organization thing, and then I'm working at this TV station, so I'm like, oh, like things that I'm like doing are on TV right now. And like I would like edit a quick little clip, whatever, and then like 2 minutes later I'd like watch it air on TV. And so it's like you go from that back to Hanford, and now I go to work at a Philly cheesesteak place and a movie theater because my mom was sick, and so I had to come back. And I'm like, I feel super like oh, like I shouldn't be doing this. Like
I feel like you're regressing.
Yeah. Like I had keys over there, and now I'm like back at this.
You said you moved back because your mom got sick.
Yeah.
I mean, did you even have a choice? Is that just...
No, because I'm her only child, and it was just her, and she doesn't have parents or anything. So
does that put pressure on you?
Yeah.
Now, like, I feel like everyone's getting older, and it's like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think it at that time I was super angry because I was always really upset growing up, because I was like, bro, like we just never really had a home. We never had a foundation. Like this whole time I was just like missing out on a lot of milestones and a lot of just like normal moments that like my friends were having.
How old were you?
When?
During this time.
When I came back,
Yeah.
I was, gosh, I don't know, like 22 or something.
Okay.
23, I don't know.
Right.
And so now I'm like forced to come back, and now I was angry because I was like, bro, like I spent all that time doing what you wanted me to do, and now I left and I was on to something, I felt like, and now I have to come back and take care of things. And then again, I'm like, this isn't fair again. Like I'm not making my own decision. And so yeah, I was really angry.
Yeah, I definitely felt that anger as a teenager too, where I remember I would just be feeling like, damn, I wish you guys could just like provide for me.
Yeah.
Like why do I have to like be worried about this, or like why am I having to deal with this problem when I just want to be like a teenager? Like I just want to have a house like my friends do, And it's so hard navigating that. I mean, I don't feel that anger anymore. I've definitely just redirected into, they did the best that they can. But I'm curious now, like, what's your relationship to your mom? Like, do you distance yourself more, or are you still like in that provider mindset?
No, it's I mean, we communicate every day. There's no distance anymore, because I think at some point you're forced to do that horrible seeming thing of like redirecting. Like you said, like bro, at some point it's like, if I'm gonna be the only one mad, then that's too much.
Yes.
It's exhausting.
I don't know how your mom is. Is she like significantly like on the older side, or is she like...
No, she's younger. She's like 52, but she's always been, I mean, she's still sick. So
Yeah.
And that's how she always was. And so she's very much disabled, and not only physically but mentally from episodes. And yeah, and to that point too is like with there's people who had like older parents and all these situations, like that's super like you recognize people who have parents like that. And so for me, like I think my thing was always like I clung to my friends who had the same thing because it's kind of like you're like at a work shift. It feels like these other people don't know that. Like these other people don't, like I would talk to my friend Allie who growing up, and I met her at the church, and she was also the lone child with sick parents, both of them. And so like for me it was always like that's who I'm gonna go to, that's who I want to talk to, because the other part of that, the other side of that feels unfair but just like kind of honest, is that like now as I'm older, I've had friends who now lost a parent or now became a caregiver, and now I can't help but feel so much empathy for them. But it's also exhausting because it's like I already did this when I was 10. Like I already did this already, and like I can't do this again. And like so there's a little bit of like there can also be like a little bit of an anger of like, you see how you feel now? You're 30. I felt that 20 years ago. I felt that 15 and 10 years ago, and also 6 years ago. That has never stopped. And now you're feeling what I felt for so much time. And I wish that you could have heard me when I told you what was going on.
Yeah.
And so there's also that. You have to constantly navigate, like, what can I take from that happened and redirect it. Is such a...
Do you think it's the feeling of like I can't think about it too much or I will like freak out? Because if you really, something that I hear me and a lot of my friends and we talk about all the time is like, if I really think about the fact that I'm like my parents' retirement plan, and as soon as like if my mom loses her job or if she can't get work here, it's, you know, the household ultimately falls on me. It's like one accident, one sickness. And there was like a scare like that where my mom got sick and she wasn't working. And it's like a big thing for so many first-gen immigrants is that we don't have community. There's also a weird thing with, I think, a lot of Mexicans is that they're just allergic to friendship and community. It's like even family is considered dangerous. At some points, they're always on guard. And what that happens is, I think it puts the pressure on the kids because as the parent, they're always like, you know, I'm not going to go make community because I can't rely on anyone but myself. But then in turn, that just puts the pressure on the kid. And I think for me, if I start to think about the fact that that pressure is on me constantly, I will just like crumble under it. And so the mindset that I think I had to adapt was just don't think about it and like keep focusing on your career, keep focusing on the thing and hope. It's just hoping that nothing bad happens. Because also, I mean, it's not in your control.
Yeah, and also the idea of community too, and like speaking with other people that get what you're going through and that experience. Being an apartment kid, that's such a big part of that. I feel like when you're a kid, obviously you don't fully see all the nuance and implications behind your living situation, community, all of that. And you just find other like-minded kids like, oh, your parents are also paycheck to paycheck. We're also going through similar things. And it's weird because I lived in that bubble. I lived in the same house for like since I was born to this day. And when I finally moved out at 18 for college, that was my first time leaving a space where like I see a lot of other people like me. They look like me. We have the same backgrounds. And then moving into a community where it was so different, like class, race, everything was just so different. And it felt so polarizing where it's that same thing. It's like, oh, I can't talk to you about this because you don't understand. And even if and that's the thing too, it's like, I don't want to share my background because I already hear how you talk about money and other communities. That's like, why would I share? I'm not going to come forward. You know, like I'm not revealing my cards here.
Yeah, sometimes it's like rare to see, you know, another Latino in one of those places. And sometimes there's not another one. And so I feel like there's also that pressure of like, I don't want to be like too Mexican. Not like, you know, in multiple ways, not too Mexican to where it's like uncomfortable for you, but also not to where it's like almost like I'm also not trying to be like a token Mexican.
Yeah.
Or like be like, oh yeah, like, you know, say things in a certain way. because I think like there's also just a responsibility to just like to like represent myself well and not be like, I'm not gonna do, you know, a certain video you know, where you know, if I'm in a group of people and they're like, oh, let's do let me grab video. I don't think that's funny at all. I don't think the border's funny at all. And so like we're gonna joke about that in a video, and I'm not gonna be used for that. You know, so I think there's that part of it.
I mean, it seems you're very value driven in your career, but when you were first in these spaces, like, how were you navigating that? I mean, like, did you have somebody else that you were going through it with, or was it just yourself?
No, I didn't do it. I didn't have anybody to go to these things with in the beginning when I first came to LA, because I wasn't allowed to bring plus ones, and a lot of the times, like, I didn't want to go because I'm so like awkward and uncomfortable. Like, I just like, I'd be outside of one, I'd be like, I don't want to go inside, like, so embarrassing, like, I don't know anybody and I'm completely alone. But then I went in and I'm just like, whatever, man, like, just go, like, who cares, like, if they don't like you, like, at least I got pizza, like, you know, like, let's just go in there and do it. And then you meet one person there who is nice and they're funny, and so you guys decide to like do a video together, and at least you got something out of that. And then you ended up making friends because they weren't as like scary as you thought they were or gonna be or something, or standoffish. Like, they weren't. They were fine, and they were also just like there. I think you learn as you keep going, like, a lot of us also don't know what we're doing. Everyone's just trying to act cool, and once you, I think also, like, as you get older, you start to realize, like, this is, like, you're not cool still. Like, you're still not, like, I'm still not cool. I'm still deeply traumatized. I'm still deeply anxious about life. Like, you can't be cool while you're so anxious. It's so weird to try to do that.
So I'm curious, where were you at 20, 21? How does it compare to the version of you now? You say you're still an anxious person. Has it got better? Was it worse before?
You know, when I was 20, 21, that's when I was living in Eureka. I don't know if this makes sense or if this is healthy, but I used to be so depressed. And I'm not depressed anymore. Now I'm just anxious.
Okay.
It feels like progress, though.
That is.
You got rid of one.
It
evolved.
and so now I'm like, yeah, anxiety is a bitch, but depression could swing. Like, depression.
Yeah, that one could take you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's got an arm. Yeah.
Anxiety, I'm like, bro, I just need a hug. Like, depression, that I was constantly like crying during those years.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm like crying less. My mission was like, I want to produce something, and I want to find a way to represent myself and what I've been through, like the experience that I've lived. But the other side of that was like, I just want to survive. Like, I just don't want to, like, I don't want to wrap things up in my life, like, at that time. Whereas now it's like, now the difference with being 29 and 20 is that I'm no longer looking at survival. And it's actually really stressful now, because it's like, wanting to live now is so scary when you didn't want to live when you were 20. That is so scary, because now I'm like, oh, fuck, I want to be here now. And that's scary, because I think it's so easy to suffer. Like, suffering is so, because you're just on like autopilot. But like, wanting to live, wanting to be here, like, you have to like physically hold on to the steering wheel now. Like, you can't just sit there and coast. But I also realize and recognize that, like, you might as well keep going, because there was so much of that time when I was 20 and when I was 15 and 11, that like, I wanted this type of thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something in media, in TV. Not this. I never thought anything related to comedy. like I wanted to like make documentaries and I wanted to produce, and so now it's like, okay, this is what you wanted, and so enjoy it and coast and travel and go to the concert, but keep going because it's fun.
It's a lot of life to live.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of
And
life
like
to live.
especially like when what we're doing, it's like we were getting like these front row seat tickets to the world, to life, and it's crazy to have that seat.
So I guess my last question is: do you feel grown now? Do you still feel like a kid?
I feel like a grown kid.
Thank you. You did it for us.
We're good actually. That's it. Don't
Yeah. Actually, shut the fuck up. Yeah. I feel I do feel like a grown kid. You know, because I have the freedom now that I'm grown that I wish I had as a kid. And now I feel like this so much of this life is a really cool playground, and I didn't spend a lot of time on a playground.
Didn't spend much time on a playground is such a crazy way to end it because it's so true, and it actually was, I don't know, it went so hard when he said that. I genuinely was like, oh, that's a perfect ending, because I think it is. I mean, it's accurate though. Like I mean, I've talked about this. I feel like I didn't spend as much time just being like a kid as I wish that I did. You know, like you're always in survival mode. And hearing him talk about that's interesting, of like no longer being in survival mode, which is so crazy to me. Because recently I've also been thinking like, damn, you know, like if I really think about it, like life is pretty good. I have like work that is meaningful. Like I have a purpose. I have friends. Like really, I just need some money. Like
That would really just put the bow around everything.
it would. It really would. Like if I didn't have to worry about rent, oh yeah, I'm doing this job forever.
That is really funny. And I think hearing him now saying that now he has opportunities to explore and play a little bit, that makes me so happy that even if you are older, as long as you have the chance and opportunity to do that, just seize it. And so it makes me really happy knowing that now he's able to explore that side of him and rediscovering. I wonder how it feels rediscovering your childlike sense of wonder at an older age when you didn't get to do that as a child. But I hope he has fun.
Up next is our friend Biyeni, who is one of the sweetest and purest souls we know. Her story with her family is also so vulnerable and powerful, which is why we knew she had to be in this episode. So I really think you'll enjoy this one. Here's Biyeni.
So I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut, and I have a single immigrant mother from West Africa, Togo specifically. I have an older sister and a younger brother. They're the people that I engage with the most in my family, so I feel like for this interview, that's who I'm going to be referring to. But yeah, I'm super close with my family. You know, we're all really hard workers, so we're not really emotional because of that. But generally, we're always there for each other. Like, I am really grateful for them, and I feel like I might have a more positive experience when it comes to having, being a first gen student because of that. When I say positive, I just want to say that, like, I feel like our relationship with each other has improved throughout time. I feel like I'm lucky to be in the position where it has improved because I know that a lot of people's families generally don't have the chance to even, or they don't even try to understand, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I definitely grew up with a lot of pressure. Like I said, my mom is a single mother immigrant from West Africa. So she came when she was about 18, 19 years old and really had to work really hard. Like she worked at McDonald's, like taking care of random people just to like make ends meet, the three kids. But so she doesn't really make excuses, If something's hard, she just like get up, fix it, move on. She's like, there's always a solution. So when it came to things like school, if we didn't have an A in every single class, there'd be a problem. Like if we weren't like going out, meeting people, like, she was really strict about like the way we presented ourselves and like how hard we were working in life because she never wanted us to be in the same position as her. Um, and yeah, I feel like because of that, there was a lot of animosity between at least me personally with my mother because when you're young, like you want that nurturing like love. You want whenever you make a mistake, you want someone to be like, it's okay, like it's normal to make mistakes. You're young. And I didn't really get that, you know? It was definitely more of just like, we can't afford to make mistakes. You need to fix this. You need to get better. And that I did. So when it comes to guilt, I do feel really bad because for a majority of my life, literally up until I went to college, I was like, this is my aunt. Like she is not, you know, she is not someone that I feel that I can be emotional with and that I even feel connected with. She kind of feels like a general in the military, you know? But once I reached college, everything sort of hit me because I started interacting with all these different people whose parents let their children make excuses and with parents like didn't love them in the way that my mom loved me. And it made me realize that she made me strong. She made me hardworking. Um, and once I was able to have that open conversation with her and express that guilt, a lot of things changed because she was like, okay, now that you're mature enough to understand why I did these things for you, I'm willing to be a little bit more emotional because I feel like you're not going to like be the type of woman that I was so honestly afraid of you turning into, you know?
That's so much pressure to have this expectation of what type of woman you're supposed to be. How did you feel like you were able to bring up the conversation and try to rekindle your relationship? I feel like it's so difficult to kind of just see someone as this like emotionally unavailable person, but still have the courage to have like this very difficult conversation with them.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it's the whole like, you know, the whole nature versus nurture like debate. I feel like because she raised me to be a certain woman, I went into college and I faced a lot of things my first semester, freshman year, a lot of things that I won't mention, but that really put me in a position to make the decision, am I going to give up right now or am I going to pick myself up and work hard and get myself out of this? And it just made me realize that she was preparing me for a lot of truths in life that, you know, I couldn't even have conceptualized at a young age. And a lot of the things that she told me, like, you should always like be ready, you should always be prepared, don't give up on yourself. Even though she wasn't emotional, she knew our capabilities and that's why she pushed us so hard because she was like being a black, like low income you know, child, like in America, like she knew that people were going to come for me and like people were always going to like find a way to push me down. And I think that I realized that from her perspective, she never wanted to make us feel like that we were small. In her way, she was trying to make us feel like we could do anything as long as we work hard for it. So yeah, when I came into college and so many things were happening and getting at me, I realized that unlike a lot of other people, I wasn't making excuses for myself. And yes, it was hard. And yes, like there are some flaws when it comes to that because you might appear as like, you know, not emotional and you might not be like validating what you're going through. But a lot of these problems were just out of my control. And I realized that I had the skills to just fix it and move on. And if I couldn't fix it, it wasn't stopping me from working harder. So yeah, when I realized that, I had a heart to heart with my mom and I was just like, this conversation needs to happen because I'm not emotional either because of how she raised us. And I was like, she doesn't know how much like the things that she has taught me is helping me right now. Like she doesn't know. And it's really, really hard to like raise children and for them to feel like you don't care when all you're doing is caring. And so I was like, I owe it to her. I'm here because of her. Even if I didn't like the way it was done, like I owe it to her to tell her. And I did. And she honestly, she I've seen this woman cry maybe twice in my life. And that was one of the moments because she was like, this is this means so much to me because I know that you're capable of so many things, and I just never wanted you to feel like you weren't. And I'm glad that like it's helping you now because honestly, she was like, it's my first time living life too. I didn't know if what I was doing was right, but I'm glad that like it's helping you in some way. And since then, it's been very like not very open, but it's been open enough where we can have these sort of conversations about the things that she did to me that I feel like were really effective or versus the things that she did to me that were not so effective. I feel like, especially me, I've always been the type of person, the type of student that everyone thought would be successful by now. Even though I haven't graduated, I thought would be set by now. Um, and my expectations are high, you know? The things I want to do in life are different than the things my family expected me to do in life. Um, and I'm really battling with like trying to find a balance in between both. I'm looking for jobs and then I get confused because I'm like, should I do this? This pays a lot, but it sounds so boring and it sounds like I will not be happy, but at least I'll get to support my family. Or should I do this where it doesn't pay as much, but I know it'll be more fulfilling and I'd be happier. And so, yeah, I actually had a conversation with my mom about it before I left for this semester, so about 2 months ago. And she did say, I just want you to be happy, but I don't want you to go through what I went through. She is letting me make my own decision, but how can it possibly be my own decision when I know I have so many people to take care of back at home? So you understand that conflict, right? Like, yes, she's saying that you can do what you want, but how? With the way that you raised me to be strong, to be protected, like, how am I supposed to make that decision?
Biyeni is genuinely like a sister to me, and I remember one of the first times that we met. The reason why we got along so well is because we bonded about being first gen and all the trauma and feelings that come with it. And so hearing her talk, I got to learn more about her as I always do. And the way that your parents raise you is always coming out of a place of love, even though it may not feel like it all of the time. And I think her having her mom always telling her, like, put your best foot forward, never look back, don't be sad, always work hard. It's a way to protect her. And I find that really endearing, but it's just hard when you are first gen because sometimes you do just want comfort. You do just want to cry and you want somebody to tell you that it's going to be okay, but you don't necessarily get that.
Yeah, it's so true. Hard, it's tough love, and unfortunately, sometimes tough love does work, which is the unfortunate truth. But up next, we are chatting with Ken Banau to help us understand the psychology behind the feelings of shame and guilt and how we can learn to overcome the emotions and try to use them to our advantage. So here's Ken. So, Ken, before getting into the conversation, I feel like it's important to understand what shame and guilt actually mean because these are emotions that me and Kayla and many other first-gen students and young people often experience. But I'm curious to know in what ways are they different and in what ways are they connected to each other?
So, first of all, shame and guilt and pride would be included in this are called self-conscious emotions because there's to some extent a focus on the self. And there's a certain amount of consciousness or awareness of the self. Now, especially when it comes to shame and guilt, they tend to be associated with some, what's called dysphoria, some negative feeling, right? When someone says, I feel bad, it's not uncommon that it would be either shame or guilt or some of both. Okay, but I prefer to call them self-other conscious emotions because there's no such thing as a self isolated from others and vice versa. And also, when it comes to shame and guilt, it's always the relationship between oneself and another that guilt or shame reside or live. Guilt is more oriented to the other. Okay, so I may feel bad, but what I feel bad about is I hurt someone or something, could even be the environment, we're here talking mostly about people, where I feel badly that I hurt them. I don't want to hurt them. And I don't like that I hurt them. And so there, the orienting is to I hurt them. So I'm oriented toward them. And in the optimal form of guilt, and guilt is not always bad. In fact, it's often positive in that I hurt you and I want to make some kind of amends. I want to make some kind of repair. So in this kind of guilt, it's called reparative guilt. I go toward you. I hurt you and I try to apologize or make it up or change my behavior going forward. Now, we tend to think sometimes of guilt as self-punitive, very punishing. I did this thing. Oh, I'm so angry with myself for having done it. Now, that kind of guilt is harmful, right? Because you're no longer orienting to how can I make this right? How can I relate differently? And you're just in this sort of punishing state. And that kind of guilt can move very quickly to or look like shame. Shame is actually not always bad. We tend to think shame is always bad, don't want to feel that. But shame actually in its what's called adaptive form is what I call self-righting shame, R-I-G-H-T. Okay, I want to make things right, but this time it's in relation to myself and my values. That's not how I want to be in the world. So that kind of shame is considered adaptive. Now, the kind of shame we tend to think of is negative, right? So far to the left is excluded. This kind of shame is excluded. I'm out. I'm not included. I'm not wanted. I'm not loved. I'm not cared for. I'm not accepted. You know, the scapegoat, the other. That's a form of shame that's the far left. If you go far right, then I'm included. Okay, I feel good and I'm a member and I'm wanted and I'm loved. Okay, so far left on this horizontal axis is one form of shame. And it is the most painful shame because if you go far, far to the left, it's like you don't exist. You don't matter. You're not even thought of. Okay, so that's extremely painful because this is a threat to one's being, one's existence. Okay, now if you go to the vertical and you go to the top of the vertical, it's superior, better than, preferred, valued. And on the bottom is shame, less than. So I'm out is one form of shame, and I'm less than is another form of shame.
That is really interesting. It makes me think about the fact that we tend to demonize these emotions and be really quick to try to label them as good or bad. And it's interesting there are positive effects of both of these. So it seems like, could shame and guilt, can they be seen as a signal, as that first signal of there is something here that isn't aligning with my behaviors or how I want to exist in this relationship?
Yes. So I want to just say one more thing about shame and guilt and then come back to your question. So the metaphor or image I use for shame is a solar eclipse, but instead of the sun eclipse being eclipsed, it's the soul, S-O-U-L. So it's the whole person. Whereas guilt is like a dark spot on the moon. So it's an aspect of my behavior, not myself as a person. So that's one important distinction, me as a whole versus something I did that I regret. Okay, so back to what you're talking about. So this is where it gets complicated. So here's what I heard you to say. Let's say you did something let's say you did something that your parents or other members of your family hadn't achieved. And you feel in some ways I've hurt them. Like somehow they might think I'm superior, or they might think I don't love them, or they might think, I don't value what they gave me, or what they showed me, and so we feel guilty, even if no one said, you're hurting me by getting that job, or you're hurting me by hanging out with those people, or going to school, or earning more money than I earned, or whatever it might be. Okay? So even if no one actually said that, of course they could, you could feel guilty. You can feel like you hurt someone that you love. Now remember, guilt is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a way of saying, you matter to me. And how I feel, how you feel in relation to me matters to me, as you would want the other way around. Okay, but what you said is, well, what happens when guilt somehow morphs into shame? So now it's not, I did something that I regret. It says something about me as a person. Okay, now remember, shame and guilt are both social emotions. They affect how we are in relation to other people, family, culture, tribe, whatever you want to call it. So what happens if you sort of move toward a certain way of being in the world, a different kind of job than your parents had, Or you don't live in the small area you grew up in. You now live in another state or even another country. No one ever even in your family went there. Okay, so you might feel some guilt, but if you're not careful, this is where it gets complicated, because if you drop into shame, the normal response to shame that is, quote, maladaptive, remember the adaptive one is I try to orient to my values, but if it's maladaptive, the normal response to shame is to withdraw and hide and isolate. But if you drop into shame and isolate, then you have now dislocated yourself from the people you love and them from you. So no one benefits from that kind of shame. What people would benefit from is if you can go toward them and say, I feel really mixed. Like, I really value all that you've done for me and made it possible for me to now do this in my life. And yet I'm going out into the world and I know you haven't been able to do that. You haven't had those opportunities. In fact, I only have the opportunities because you afforded them to me. And then in the ideal world, they say or feel, no, that's a good thing. I'm glad that I could support you in doing that. But of course, that isn't necessarily the response you get. You might get the response, oh, you think you're better than I am, okay? And if the person is already feeling bad about themselves for doing that, now this is getting complicated, because there's what's the repair to make? What's the way to set that right? The person then is torn, because if they feel a connection to their people, they're not going to lose that. But also they're trying to form new connections to their peers or the people they work with, etc. And so they're torn.
So then what about the opposite? How do you begin to nurture pride, and maybe in something that was once shameful or something that made you feel guilt? How do you turn that the other way around into now something that you find pride in?
Okay, so the first thing is we have to remember that in many cultures, pride is considered bad. The thing about pride is, like other other emotions, it's always in relationship. Okay, so you're going to want to, just like you're going to want to seek people to help you find acceptance, right? I know you messed up, but you're not a bad person. I'm right here. You also want people to welcome you when you're feeling pride. Some people can be threatened by you feeling pride because they think you're doing the pride of better than, as opposed to, I'm not feeling better than you. I'm just feeling good that I accomplished that. Okay? So sometimes what you need also is support for the accomplishment, a recognition. So that can sometimes help. The other thing is sometimes people are threatened when you feel good. So you have to be aware that sometimes people are not going to be so accepting of you feeling good about yourself. And in those situations, you need to recognize that actually says nothing about me. It does say something about them. And if I'm not sure about that, go find someone who recognizes what I did as a positive thing. And then I can view that as, well, that's maybe they're feeling insecure, but I'm not doing it to them, and it says nothing about me.
So I think chatting with Ken, it really made me reflect on the role of shame and guilt, but more than anything, like pride. And like, yes, I carry a lot of guilt. I don't think I carry much shame, thankfully. But I actually do carry a lot of pride. I think I am very prideful, and part of that just comes from my mom and the way that the environment that she raised me in, which was her being a very prideful woman in all areas of her life, in her work, in her personality, and everything. And I think now that I'm growing up, I'm realizing how that really rubbed off on me. And I'm really thankful for it, because I think being prideful in your work is important. And I'm definitely still working on it. I think I'm trying to leave this period of shame, of like feeling shamed about like my success or my work, and just being prideful about it, which we've talked about it before. But yeah, I think all of that was really interesting to learn about how like shame and guilt aren't inherently bad either, as long as you use them correctly. But anyways, here's our closing thoughts. Honestly, my words of advice is just have the courage to live a life your own. That's the most you can do. And maybe probably the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to take up space. Use all the resources that are there for you, even though it might be scary, which I'm also learning. I'm right there with you, girl.
Take up space. Take up space.
Take up space. And just know, I know it sounds so cheesy, but you really are not alone. And it's like a lot of times it feels really isolating dealing with these overwhelming emotions by yourself, but there's so many of us out there.
Yeah.
So many of us.
Anyways, thank you all so much for listening. But of course, throughout the next couple episodes, we'll just be dealing with so many more topics that, emotions, themes, everything that you deal with being in your 20s. It's a lot. So we're right there with you. Regardless, thank you for listening. New episodes every Thursday.
And feel free to leave us a comment if you're listening on Spotify. There'll be a Q&A or poll. So let us know what you're thinking. We'd love to chat and just hang out with you guys.
Thank you all so much for listening, and see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.